We are still more than 150 days away from MSU football's kickoff, but no, we are still getting down to the nitty-gritty of the defensive line. Keon Coleman, Nathan Carter, the offensive line, and we're doing it with a brilliant football mind, Chase Glasser of Spartans Illustrated. Let's get it poppin'.
You are Locked On Spartans, your daily podcast on the Michigan State Spartans, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Spartan friends, Spartan family, Locked On Spartans listeners, thank you so much for kicking off your week with us here at Locked On Spartans. That's right, your team in green and white 5 days a week here in the Locked On Podcast Network. I am joined by this gentleman next to me. His name is Chase Glasser. He does fantastic work at SpartansIllustrated.com. We're going to get into all this in a little bit, but before that, we'll be a nice host. Hey, how you doing, Chase? We doing okay over there?
Doing great.
Okay, we'll see if we could change that in the next 25-ish minutes. But yeah, here we go. So before we get into the nitty-gritty of all things football, because that is definitely your expertise, one quick note I want to mention, Kerr Tang. Yes, the 6'3", 6'4", depend what site you look on, shooting guard out of the East Coast. He is going to be committing on Monday at noon. Or if you're a later podcast listener, like you listen while you cook dinner, this thing has already happened on Monday. But yes, Monday at noon, he's down between Rutgers, Providence, and you guys guessed it, your Michigan State Spartans. So keep your eye on that for the top 40 recruits commitment at noon. I really hope it all goes well. Chase, do you want to talk about Kerr Tang's commitment, or do you just want to, talk about what you really are here for, MSU football?
Well, I'm sure he'll be a great player wherever he goes.
There we go.
Yeah, it'd be good to see him in the green and white.
That's the spirit. So if no one is familiar with Chase's work at Spartans Illustrated, let me tell you, you are missing out. He does film room reviews, studies, explainers. He chops up a lot of GIFs, and these are awesome because they are at a very high level. This is for the nerdiest of football nerds like myself. But also he writes it so well that even someone with a kindergartner's mind like myself can understand everything he's talking about. So he really strikes that sweet spot. Go check him out, Spartans Illustrated. But Chase, you've written a few of these. You got a Spencer Brown one, Nathan Carter, Keon Coleman. But the one I want to start off with is the defensive line room for Michigan State. And I thought the way you started this was very interesting because we didn't start off with the players. We started off with the new assistant coach, Diron Reynolds, who came in from Stanford. What do you got to think, or what do you got to say about him? How do you think he's going to shake things up in this season one for him?
Yeah, I think looking at Michigan State for pretty much all of my conscious football watching life, Michigan State's always had a very good defense. And there's so many great defensive linemen that have come through. It's hard watch. So Diron Reynolds comes over from Stanford, and Stanford wasn't necessarily a great football team. And it's hard to watch a position group and necessarily see, okay, well, this can be isolated as to what the coach does, but you can watch a position group and get a pretty good idea. And I think when you watch Stanford's defensive line, specifically, I watched their game against Notre Dame, because that was Midwestern team, a style of offense that's not foreign from us. It's something that's kind of illustrative more broadly, and I thought that they were well coached. What do you really look for is basic technique and gap integrity. And the players on Stanford's defensive line, they generally knew where they were supposed to be. They didn't get upfield. It looked like they played within the construct of the defense, and they did what they were supposed to do, and they got a win that they weren't expected to get over a pretty good Notre Dame team.
Right. No, not bad at all. Oh, sorry.
Yeah. No. So, it's I think he'll be a good coach. He gets rave reviews pretty much everywhere he's been as a great instructor, a good teacher. And that's what you really want, because in college athletics, much more so than the pros, there is an instructive aspect where you have people who come in boys, they leave men. And if he's someone who's able to mold that and be instructive, I think it's a good hire. It's a shame that a position group I think is very deep has taken some of the personnel hits that it has with Brandon Jordan leaving, with Marco Coleman leaving. But I think that they're in pretty good hands with Reynolds.
I would say so too. And even back to his days at Oklahoma, you got rave reviews from the players. I know that fan base was pretty upset when he left for Stanford. Not upset at him, but they were just heartbroken. Like, oh, we let a good one get away. But So, yeah, you do lose some with Marco Coleman, Brandon Jordan, but, I mean, hey, Diron Reynolds, you're next up, and your explainer, really, I always thought highly of him going in, but reading what you wrote, that helps a lot. We got another newcomer, a new face for the defensive line as well, and let's get down to the players here, and we're going to start it off with, okay, here we go. Tunmise Adeleye. That's how we're going to go with it right now. The Texas A&M transfer, the former 5-star recruit. I think said his name right there. No one has corrected me on that, and maybe it's because no one else is confident, but if I'm off there, I'm sorry. Yeah, I got you sold on it. Everyone knows who I'm talking about, and that's kind of the goal here. But what do you do with him? Like, because he can play a little differently. He can go inside. He can go outside. I heard some whispers that, hey, yeah, he has it in him to play linebacker too. I don't think that'll be the case, but what do you do with such a talent such as this kid?
I mean, I love that. If you're a defensive coordinator, you love that, because though we haven't seen it necessarily from Hazelton, there's a lot of stuff you can do. You can go to an odd front, something like a 5-2. You can have him playing a 3 technique, and with someone who's that rangy, you see Michigan do it with Jalen Harrell. You line him up on the edge, and then he drops off into coverage. They've done that with a few other guys, some of those kind of in-betweener types that can play a variety of different positions. You can use a guy like that in a variety of ways to keep defenses guessing, have him cover the hook curl, do a couple different things. But I think he's probably going to be best just put him on the edge, put him outside a tackle, and let him tear. But positional versatility is so important in football, maybe a little less so in college football, just because you have a much bigger roster than you do in the NFL. Sure. But a guy like that's going to give you coverage ability, at least in some parts. And if you can have an edge that can drop out and cover the flat, and then you can bring a corner off the edge or somebody on a replacement blitz, there's a lot of things that you can do with that. So that's never a bad thing. I think he's going to be a good presence off the edge. With that ranginess, I'd imagine him probably to align to the field a little more than the boundary, just because he kind of has that ranginess. He can get out, he can cover a screen, can cover a stretch, something like that.
And, you guys obviously are breaking down all the film from last season. So let's start talking about the guys from last year. I mean, we got Chris Bogle, we got Derek Harmon, Simeon Barrow, Maverick Hansen, Avery Dunn, Zion Young. I mean, there were a lot of guys that got some playing time, whether it was because, hey, they were good enough to play, or everyone was just dying throughout the season on the field. It was just bodies everywhere. But regardless, everyone got a lot of reps. Is there anyone that sticks out the most to you as like, oh yeah, this is the guy that's going to make some hay? Is it just as easy as Harmon and Barrow, or is there someone in that 2 deep that you have your eye on?
I mean, I think the interior of Michigan State's defensive line is going to be outstanding. And with that, you look at Harmon, you look at Barrow. I think both those guys are going to be monsters. I like Alex VanSumeren. I knew his brother a little bit when he went to school with him for a bit down the road, and then he was friend of a friend, and I know he was really excited about what his brother could do. Obviously, he's coming in as a young kid, but I would not be surprised to see somebody like him, high 4-star, be able to play. I'm really excited about Barrow. I think he's just a tremendous player. I think he plays with violence. He has good pad level. He's able to cover multiple gaps. When you see somebody on the interior of a defensive line beating a guard to the inside and just blowing up an A gap, I mean, that's one of the best things that you can have as a defensive coordinator, just because so much of, especially looking in the Big Ten, not so much Ohio State, but you look at Iowa, you look at Michigan, look at Illinois, so much of what they do is based off of A-gap power. And if you can have just a big body like a Harmon, like a Barrow, you put him in at the 3-tech, have him knife inside, you can disrupt so much. I think those guys are going to be really good in kind of the scheme that they run. Excited to see some of the young guys come in, by Job, Andrew DePepe. Don't know how much they're necessarily going to play, but there's depth there. I think with what you see with Michigan State having to run so many guys out there on defense last year, I think 27 defensive starters, that is obscene, but you have much, you do have a lot of development. Zion Young was really forced into it, into playing early because of injury, but he got better because of it. You had people kind of in a perverse sort of way develop on all 3 levels of the defense because of just the insane amount of injuries.
And Avery Dunn was one guy that I thought, came along well at the end of the season.
Yeah,
like, I'm not saying, oh, that's a first team all Big Tenner, but like, that's going to be a great depth piece for this defensive line.
Yeah.
I think that there is one big name we haven't gotten to just yet that I want to get to in a hot second, but Chase, this is what we call a tease in the podcast industry. I'm trying to get a little better at this. But first we need to talk to people's ear off about FanDuel Sportsbook, America's #1 sportsbook. And it is still the #1 time of year to get in on the action. Someone's cutting down some nets tonight. You want to go bet on that? We'll do so at FanDuel, and also in a few days here, Masters. We're in full swing with the Masters. That's right. Tony Finau at 32-1 is a bet I already placed on FanDuel. That's right. America's #1 sportsbook. And if you're a new customer this time of year, well, it gets even sweeter for you because new customers get a no sweat first bet up to $1,000. That is up to $1,000 back in bonus bets. If your first bet doesn't win, just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon and sign up today and claim your no sweat first bet. Wager on everything from money line, point spread, which team is going to be cutting down the net. Make one of those same game parlays. It's all on an app that's safe, secure, super easy to use. So do not miss your shot at the no sweat first bet up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. Make every moment more with FanDuel. And let's get Chase Glasser back on the podcast here. Is your day still going great? Has anything changed in that minute or no?
Oh, something that's very, very funny happened. I am hearing that Hunter Dickinson enters the transfer portal or is expected to. Jeff Goodman tweeted that out. So that's very funny at the time of the recording. I'm sorry. What?
Yeah, sorry. What?
I just saw a tweet when you were doing the ad read that Hunter Dickinson is transferring. Which is very funny. So if you guys don't know me, I did go to the University of Michigan. I am a Michigan football fan. I have a very ironic relationship with Michigan basketball in that I just find it very funny. And I guess my initial thought is anybody going to like this guy? Because nobody liked him outside of Michigan. And now, this is just an ontologically funny
oh my
occurrence.
God.
Yeah,
I heard one whisper that he's going to go to Georgetown, and I took it with a grain of salt. I was like, yeah, DMV kid, sure, like, fine, I guess. But, wow. Okay, I'm sorry. Well, we're getting way off the page. I'm sorry. Thank you for that news, though. By the time people listen to this, I mean, peek behind the curtain here. It is Friday afternoon, as you probably figured out, everyone. But, wow. Yeah. Okay. What? That's right. That's okay. Okay, football. I was going to tease, so my head is spinning right now.
Good player. Player that we were going to talk about after the ad read. Yeah.
Actually, speaking of guys in the transfer portal, let's talk about someone that MSU got in the transfer portal last year who probably won't be on the defensive line this year, and that is one Jacoby Windman. Mel Tucker pretty much has said himself that, he will be playing linebacker this season. Do you agree with that? Like, is that a good call, you think? Because in my opinion, that's probably a safe home for him. How about you?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think there's a couple things you look at. He did really well coming off the edge against Western. I mean, he was a monster. And then again, against Akron. But his production off the edge dropped precipitously once they hit conference play. And that's not necessarily his fault. I mean, he was playing at UNLV. Mm-hmm. You're not playing against the type of tackles that you play against in the Big Ten, So you get a guy like that, you slim him down, because he played linebacker and filled in pretty serviceably while playing at a defensive end's weight, So so you put him back in the middle of the defense, all of a sudden you're looking at a pretty promising linebacker level. You think you get Snow healthy, you get him in there and a few other guys that are going to be pretty darn good. And then all of a sudden, with what we've talked about with some of the guys on the defensive line, that front seven of the defense is looking pretty solid. And looking at it last year, in my opinion, and people have looked into this, putting the numbers aside a little bit because of the strength of schedule, University of Michigan had one of their worst years from a pure pass rush perspective since Rich Rod, but it didn't matter because they had a really good secondary, right?
Sure.
Now, Michigan State, there's been some struggles that we've had in the secondary.
It's the opposite.
But if you have a really good pass rush, if you're getting in the quarterback's face, it doesn't matter as much. So you hope you have a really strong front seven that can mitigate some of the issues that could pop up in the secondary. And we'll be doing a deep dive in the secondary as the spring and summer goes on. But I think Windman dropping back to linebacker is going to be great. And also he's going to be big enough where, you can have him pop down and take on a pulling guard, right? And that's not going to be an issue. But I think he's going to be a good fit on that kind of middle level of the defense. Maybe not going to be your prototypical coverage guy, but you've got Darius Snow for that. And I think against the run, he'll be great, especially with some of these power running attacks that Michigan State's going to see next year. I think he's going to be great, not just as a package guy, but pretty much an every down, especially first 2 down guy.
Yeah, and like just as far as linebacker pass coverage goes, like the bar is pretty low for face off last year too. So like like that, it's like, oh, he's not great at pass coverage. Like, oh, okay, we're used to that. That's fine. But no, hopefully Darius Snow comes back healthy. Aaron Brule is healthy the entire season. Like he does an adequate job. So we'll see. But I love the way this conversation is going because there's optimism here. You know, we just talked about a great position group. This is fantastic. And you've also done film studies on 2 other guys that we could be optimistic about on the other side of the ball. We're talking offense. We're talking Neon, Keon Coleman. We're talking Nathan Carter. Let's start with the Neon man himself. You did a great write-up on him. We think the world of Keon Coleman. I think he's a lovely player. He's awesome to watch. With that said, though, let's turn this on a 180. What weakness does he have in his game, you think? Let's level set here, and then we'll break him down to build him up through this conversation.
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, he's a superlative receiver. I think he's going to be great. And honestly, a couple people pointed this out when I posted that column, which I do think is quite good on Coleman, that a lot of the issues that he has could well be mitigated with an offseason of not having to juggle being a Division I athlete for 2 different teams.
That hurts, right? Yeah.
So, and a lot of that is, it's just the finer points of being a wide receiver. The physical talent is beyond reproach. He is superlatively talented, and we'll get to all that. But you see imprecision in his route running, I think, is the biggest thing. So there's times where he gets rerouted. You're running a drag route across the middle, and he gets knocked off his route by a linebacker. Right. And because that's legal, you can drop off and you can smash a guy who's coming across, you know, if you're within 3-5 yards of the line of scrimmage. You can't get rerouted because, especially if you're coming across the middle, a guy that sure-handed, that big, that strong, he's going to be an outlet for whoever the quarterback's going to be. And if the timing is messed up a little bit and all of a sudden people aren't where they're supposed to be, that's an issue. So he's got to be a little bit better with that.
Okay.
I think it's really route running, I think, is the biggest thing. Getting a little more polished on his releases. He doesn't create separation with his routes. And kind of as we turn into what's good about him, most of the time that doesn't really matter.
Right. Yeah.
Because he is so physical. I mean, a lot of his routes, you look at him on fades, and he almost just is kind of leaning into the cornerback and then turning his body and making a catch, almost like a box out, which, I mean, that makes sense, right? He's a basketball player.
Yeah.
But you want to see next year, he's going to be drawing the number 1 corner from every team that they play, and probably a shaded safety as well. So precision route running is going to be very important. You want to create separation with your routes, and then you can use another aspect of his game is the yards after catch. There's a clip in there where Coleman has just mastered this little, very subtle push off at the top of routes. It almost never gets called. It will always draw a hilarious reaction from a cornerback, but it will virtually never get called. I think he only got called for OPI once or twice last season.
Okay.
And once was just because he did it in the end zone right in front of a ref and the guy's helmet comes off. Right. So, but he's aligned to the boundary. He's going against DJ Turner. It's Michigan's number 1 corner. And he runs just a pretty simple stick route and pushes off a little bit at the top of the route, comes back to the ball, catches it. And then you watch him, he turns up field and he just completely outruns DJ Turner, who, you know, ostensibly ran the fastest 40 time of anybody in the draft. Right. So, I mean, the physical tools are remarkable. If you clean up the route running a little bit, he's so good. You can really see him make some hay over the middle of the field. You put him in the seam against the safety, forget about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, like, what is it that is going to put him above, like, the other team's number 1 corner? Because, you know, we just talked about that. You know, he's got that nice little move at the top right there. He's got great breakaway speed. And also, too, I go to that quote last year where he said, I don't do 50-50 balls. To me, they're, what did he say? They're like 90-10 balls or 100% balls. And like, at the time, it's like, oh, that's great. You love a wide receiver with confidence. Haha, that's a good one. And then throughout the season, it's like, oh my, that he wasn't doing a bit. That he wasn't kidding. That was serious.
Right.
Like, so what is it that makes him just so strong against even top flight corners that you expect?
I mean, it's just it's kind of physiologically, I don't know. It's just he's a grown ass man. I mean, he really is. And I think the biggest thing is even DJ Turner is a good corner, but I think he was only 6 foot, right? So it's just you can have the best technique, you can have the best leverage, you can have the best alignment, and it just doesn't matter. When it's going to be that Michigan game next year is going to be really interesting, just because their number one corner is going to be Will Johnson, and he's huge. He's a big kid, and Coleman's huge. But if you look at their playing weight, I mean, I think Coleman's probably gonna have 20 pounds on him when they play that game, and that matters when you're going up and you're trying to box somebody out for a jump ball. That matters, and I think it's going to be fascinating to see him go against kind of those bigger, stronger corners. But that doesn't necessarily mean that there's a lot of them in the Big Ten. It just depends on personnel. It depends on matchups, but he's just so physical. His jumping ability is so good. He times the ball in the air extraordinarily well, where the ability to track the ball. So I was not good at football. I played was an operative term. I was on the team in high school.
Same.
Ostensibly as a wide receiver. And man, it's hard tracking the ball in the air, especially when we have somebody trying to prevent you from catching it. He is so good at almost contorting his body 180 degrees to catch a ball and then remain on his feet and run a guy over or keep going for yards after catch. You put all that together in the complete package. You kind of put it in the oven for another year. I think he's going to be an absolute monster. It's going to be very interesting to see him, just what he's able to do, because he's going to be a security blanket. He's going to be a focal point. Very excited to see what he can do.
He's going to be that guy where, it's the meme you always see on the internet, like, oh, F it, blank is down there somewhere. And like, it'll be Keon Coleman is down there somewhere. From one offensive weapon to another, you did a great piece on Nathan Carter as well. And what I actually, before we get to this, I need to clear something up. I said last week, I talked about Jay Johnson. He talked about running backs, and I started it with Jalen Berger's probably got the starting role locked up. It'll be interesting to see who's behind him. That is probably just false. I would like to walk that back. I think Nathan Carter could be competing for a starting role here after seeing the film breakdown, after hearing a little bit of whispers from inside the practice room. That was erroneous last week, so I just wanted to clear that up. And also, one thing too is that not only are you educating people with the film reviews and everything like this, but you also have a little bit of humor / like just brutal honesty, because you wrote, quote, he displays an ability to run through initial contact, which is something one would have to get very good at behind UConn's offensive line, which I got to chuckle at. And then I realized, like, it's actually probably very true, unfortunately.
Yeah, you're getting a lot of free hitters there.
He was great at yards after contact, and there was no shortage of opportunity for that over at UConn, which I got to say had a fine season. They made a bowl game. Save all your jokes, everyone. Like, at the end of the day, it's still UConn, and you'd hope that MSU would have a better offensive line this year. So, what sticks out the most about Nathan Carter's game for you? Is it just that breaking contact ability, or is it something that's even deeper than that?
No, I think he's a nice back. You talked about, who's going to be the starting running back, and what does that mean, right? Because last year, Berger, Collins, and Broussard, they all got touches. So whoever is 1A and 1B, they're going to get packages. They're going to get touches. I think Carter's a very interesting back. The first thing that stands out is he's fast, right? And he got hurt. I think he was out for the season about halfway through their game against Michigan last year. And he's very much, I think, ingratiated himself to the fan base, talking about, they knocked me out for the season, so I'm well acquainted with that school down there. I want to get my get back, So the mindset's there, right? But he's fast. He's a fast back, and Michigan State runs a lot of zone, right? Just kind of schematically, you're running outside zone, you're running inside zone, and a lot of that is, can I get to where I want to go before the defender can, right? It's not so much, we're gonna run duo, we're gonna double the defensive tackles, and I'm gonna pick a gap, and that. No, it's just student body left, and you got to get there faster than the other guy. And I think he's going to be able to do that. He's slippery, has a good cutback ability. And this isn't to say it's hard to prognosticate what it looks like when he's not just you don't have 2 games of film against Michigan, Syracuse, and I think Utah State. But You don't know what it's going to look like when he's consistently playing against high-level competition, but there's tools there. He's fast. He can jitterbug. He can bounce off of guys, good contact, and he can also catch the ball. And that's something that we've seen with Jay Johnson is if you have a guy who can catch the ball. I mean, Berger's not necessarily great at that, but he was getting flare routes. He was getting screens. Yep. He was getting Texas routes. And I think you're certainly going to see that from Berger because, I mean, you see that in games. I mean, God, I saw Michigan and Washington really isolated MSU's linebackers in coverage last year. And it's hard. If you're a linebacker, it's hard, especially in the Big Ten. Unless you're playing Maryland or maybe Ohio State, you're going to be focused on the run first. If you're matched up with a running back coming out of the backfield, you're probably misaligned, right? You don't have the leverage that you need to because you're trying to get into a run fit. And then all of a sudden you got to cover a guy who's much faster than you almost invariably. I think he's going to be a weapon out of the backfield. So he has that aspect to his game too, including catching the ball in traffic, right? Not just, okay, there's nobody down. Everybody's downfield. I'm going to chuck it to a guy 2 yards downfield and have him fall forward. It goes a little bit deeper than that. And where he has what I would think is legitimate route running ability. So he's certainly going to get his next year.
And, to put a bow on this whole thing, we got to talk about, the hogs in the trenches, the offensive linemen. You did a piece on Spencer Brown as well. What do you do with Spencer Brown? Because he was fine. Yeah, last year he was fine. But you also have Brandon Baldwin, JD Duplain, Nick Samek. They're going to be in the middle. But with Keyshawn Blackstock coming in, that's the interesting thing. Like, does that mean Spencer Brown lost his right tackle spot? Is Keyshawn Blackstock going to step in there? Is Blackstock inside? Like, what do you do with Spencer Brown? Right.
Well, and I don't know. So I actually think I don't know. I love the offensive line. I love watching good offensive line play. It's so fun and such an integral part of the game. I think Brown could be, and this is it all. I don't know. I don't pretend to know what goes on. All I know is just kind of what I'm able to see and try to flesh out, and no idea what that means. But I think Brown could be a guy that moves inside. And this is it's not necessarily because I think, oh, well, he's made to be a guard. He's got a fine frame to be a tackle, but I have a sneaking suspicion that he has short arms. In watching the film, the biggest thing to me that stood out was when he contacts a guy, he's fine. He is a well above replacement tackle, but he struggled to contact and he struggled to initiate and maintain contact on guys. So when you're a tackle and you're going against all these speed rushers, these guys who are just tearing off the edge, a lot of times it looked like he almost couldn't get his hands on people, where he set up well. He clearly knows what he was. There were some times where he got confused, zone blocking. He's kind of running around trying to find someone to block. That'll happen. You get another year older, another year in the offense. These things happen. But I really think he when he latched onto somebody, he was fine. But it's just that making and maintaining of contact he struggled with. And if you're inside, just necessarily you're going to be going up against someone who's, first of all, they're not from a 2-point stance, they're from a 3-point stance. They're a 3 technique, they're 5 technique, they're 1 technique. It's just easier. There's a shorter range of space to get on a guy. And I think that'd help him make initial contact. Because once he gets onto you, I mean, he's a big, strong kid. That is very clear. I don't know if they necessarily want somebody that tall playing inside. I mean, you got that's something they have to figure out internally. But I would be surprised if, and we may never know if this happens, but throughout the course of fall camp, especially if Blackstock's playing well, if he doesn't at least get a look at guard. Now, a totally different position, totally different responsibilities, everything like that. But I think some of the issues that I saw with him maintaining contact would be alleviated with him moving inside. Doesn't necessarily mean he's going to move inside or he's going to even be good inside, but it's a possibility.
It's just exciting to be talking about healthy offensive linemen too in the spring.
Certainly,
yes, over here in East Lansing. Like what a change of pace this has been. This was great. You know what? Not a lot of episodes where we talk football the entire time, and it's just optimism from wire to wire coming off of a 5-7 season. But you know what? It's spring. Spring is in the air. Optimism is in the air, and we are starting our ascent to just absolutely hammering the over on the win total with all of our mortgage payments what a way to start this. Let's go.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Back, baby.
I mean, quite frankly, I would like to think, given my background, I have a generally unbiased, well, maybe biased in a different direction, but I think Michigan State's going to be fine. I really do. I see you're in group chats, you're on Twitter, whatever. You see people, oh, Michigan State's winning 4 games. I don't see it. I genuinely think Michigan State's going to win at least 8 games, 7, 8 games. I think at the end of the season, Michigan State fans are going to be like, all right, we're on the right track. I don't see it. I don't see the bottom falling out. I really don't. I think, Michigan State just fired the recruiting coordinator coming off of one of the better classes in school.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like, there is talent there. There's talent percolating. This was always going to be a process. And I think Michigan State's going to be fine. I don't see people talking when people are talking about disaster, things like that. Yeah, could it happen? Sure. But I think Michigan State's going to broadly be fine. And then, you look down the road in 2025, maybe 2024, things could get interesting, right? And with where the program was coming from, a frank admission that, Mark D'Antonio, I think, is one of the 2 or 3 best coaches that have ever come out of the state of Michigan.
Love the guy.
What he did with Quarters Match, he just had the Big Ten fooled for about 10 years. But, we all know what happened towards the end of his tenure. And
not good.
Right. Depth matters in college football. And even if you look at what Michigan State did, bringing in a lot of preferred walk-on guys, it's depth. It means you're taking less hits in practice. It's just more bodies. It's a process. And I think broadly, Michigan State will probably be fine.
I needed to hear that. I needed to hear that more than 7 or 8 wins. I'll see you guys in Nashville for the Music City Bowl, which might as well be Pasadena for me coming off last season. So no, that's just what the doctor ordered out, man. This is awesome. Whether you like it or not, Chase, I'm going to try to have you on the show more.
That sounds great. I'd love to be here.
The calendar. And if you want more of this great insight, again, Spartans Illustrated, go subscribe. A lot of great work, not just from Chase, but the whole gang over there. So yes, gang, hop on over Spartans Illustrated. Thanks a ton, Chase, for all your insight and your time as well, and also for the breaking Hunter Dickinson news. I selfishly, just because I hope it's true. We could be on Monday thinking, but I saw a tweet from Goodman, and my buddy who's a manager's, going on about it. So it's very funny. I'm very done with the basketball program. Good.
I didn't want Juwan hired. I really didn't. I have a lot of thoughts, and that's a whole different podcast. But that'd
be a fun one too, though.
Very funny. I hope it turns out to be true. Very, very funny.
Well, it's true or not, what an entertainment. What entertainment for a half hour here. Thanks a ton. Thanks everyone else. We'll be back tomorrow. We'll be breaking down Kirk Tang's his commitment. Now, will it be to Michigan State or not? Who's to say, but we'll break it down regardless, whatever happens on a whole other green and white news. Until then, hey, let's all go enjoy our weeks. Love you all. Go green.